Hey, it's New Thought Talk. I'm your host, the Reverend Steve Walling from the Spiritual Awareness Center located in Fresno, California. You know, Fresno, the heart of the Central Valley, and the Central Valley being the heart of California, like I like to say before each show. We got a lot of heart going on here, and today is no exception. I hope that as you greeted the day this morning before you even opened your eyes, that you claimed your good, you spoke your word, and you thanked the divine being, that which we call God, our first cause, for the gift of this day and all the good that's going to come your way as an expression of God being divinely guided and guarded throughout the entire day. Welcome to the show. Anyway, a couple weeks ago, we were talking about the power of thought. And then last week, I spent some time on this idea, the concept of what we call race thought or race consciousness or the collective unconscious, and the role that it plays in influencing our day-to-day life experience, particularly if we live in ignorance and we're not aware of it. But, you know, even for those of us that have some understanding, oftentimes, because mentally sometimes we just get a little lax, if you will, and because this is so prominent within the subjective side of life that it can creep back into our consciousness at a level that we're not aware of and begin to influence us in ways that are not necessarily so good. But also, as I talked about it, I spoke to the fact that there is also a lot of good in race consciousness, race thought. It's not all negative, but it has its effects. So the reason why we talked about those things is because of this thing that we call prayer. Now, in shows past, I've talked about the various steps that we basically outline in prayer, and it's pretty simple and easy to explain. But there is I've talked about it also in the past, the Holmes Institute home study course that Dr. Holmes put out many years ago. That was consolidated into a 6-volume set that looks something like this. And then that went out of print. But recently, several years ago, they reissued it. Instead of 6 volumes, it's now 4 volumes. It's still one of the cornerstone tools that I use in teaching this concept of science of mind and spirit. One of the reasons why is that it was put together by Dr. Holmes, which and I've told this many times, I'm kind of old school when it comes to science of mind and spirit or religious science, and I believe that what Dr. Holmes felt that was the most important thing to teach people about religious science, he put together in this home study course because it was for people that weren't able to get to a center easily, and they could learn on their own, they could put it into practice on their own, and they could begin to become a practitioner in their own life experience. And again, I use the word practitioner. Let me clarify that. I'm not specifically talking about licensed or certified practitioners, but I'm talking about any individual that has made the choice to learn and embody the concepts in New Thought, Science of Mind and Spirit, and utilize this tool of affirmative prayer as a tool in demonstrating their own life experience. So, prayer, big subject, right? Dr. Holmes, he gives a chapter in the textbook. It's chapter 9, and it starts off entitled Prayer. I'm going to just read the opening paragraph or two, where Dr. Holmes says, one of the questions most frequently asked about the science of mind is, are prayers and treatment identical? He says the answer to this question is both yes and no. He says if one prays his prayer or her prayer, if it is a recognition of Spirit's omniscience, omnipresence, and omnipotence, and a realization of man's unity, humanity's unity with Spirit, then this prayer is a spiritual treatment. If, on the other hand, one is holding to the viewpoint that God is some far off, you know, the guy, the beard, the chair, so on and so forth, right, being, who he would have to approach with doubt in his thought, wondering if by some good luck he may be able to placate God, convince God, well, we can't really blackmail God, but you get the point, right? And persuade him to the wisdom of this one individual's request. Then there's but little similarity between prayer and treatment. Prayer and treatment. We talk about affirmative prayer in New Thought. We talk about prayer treatment in Science of Mind and Spirit, and we lay a lot of emphasis on it. And I truly believe that it lies at the foundation of what it is that we do. We are a healing philosophy, if you will. Yes, it ended up as a religion, but it's a religion that's based on this healing philosophy, and understanding that as someone that is on this spiritual journey, and you've chosen to make Science of Mind and Spirit an integral part of that journey, having an understanding within yourself of not just the steps in treatment, but how Holmes thought treatment prayer was to be used and expressed in our life. And as I was teaching out of this, and we got to, I think it's lesson 35, and it doesn't make any difference whether you have an older set or a newer set, but in here, okay, lesson 34, got to be 35. Probably should have had this, okay. It's entitled Pray and Prosper. And for an inclusion into the home study course, it's quite extensive. There's a lot here. And as I was going through it, I wanted to talk about it, and I'm preparing for the show, and I'm going through and I'm thinking, you know, I remember there's something more to this. And I looked and I went online and I typed in Pray and Prosper, Ernest Holmes, and lo and behold, Amazon has a book. When I pulled up the book, I went, I know that book. I have it. I got a lot of books. My library's rather large. I'm not always aware of the books that I have because, well, given the experience of my life, there's just a lot, and I remember, sometimes I don't, but I remembered this book by the cover. And this is the book. It's called Pray and Prosper by Ernest Holmes. You can get this on Amazon, and they will tell you that it is a copy of the original book itself, which was copyrighted in 1944. This was published in 2011, so it's out there, and you can get it. You can get it for yourself. I highly recommend it because, like a lot of things, when Dr. Holmes presents the things that he presents in the textbook, he fleshed out a lot of these things, either through the home study course or some of the other books. I highly recommend Living the Science of Mind if you don't have that, because most of those, if not all of them, were taken from talks that he had given, wherein he brings more light to various topics that we talk about. And it's important that we have a good understanding of this as we move forward in our daily journal. You know, I tell people, and I tell people as you work on this, we have certain tools that we use that are important. And, you know, like I said when we opened the show, did you embrace the day, owning it as the gift that was given to you by first cause, by divine principle, by God? However you understand the source of the good and all that is in life, it gifted us that day. It gifted us the life that we have. It gifted us just through the creation of each and every one of us in what we call, in what Jesus called the image and the likeness. And what we're talking about is the nature of this divine spirit of God itself. And that nature is the creative nature, because that's what it does. It creates. Well, that's what we do also. And that's where understanding what the power of thought is, what it brings to the table, understanding how it can work for us, understanding how it can work against us through our ignorance, understanding how race consciousness has a role that it plays, and it's not something that we address just once and we move on. It's something that we need to be aware of, even if we've been in this spiritual philosophy for a long time, because things happen. And the influence, it's like a subtle pressure. And oftentimes when we're not paying attention, that subtle pressure applied over an extended period of time may actually surface within our subjective mind at a level that we're not aware of and begin to influence our life experience. When it does, you know, we need to be aware. How are we aware? We just take a look at what's going on in our life. If we're experiencing things that are good, things that are harmonious, things that are peace, things that are beauty, things that are of abundance in a positive way, then we know we're pretty much working at the level we should be. We should never be satisfied with being in our comfort zone, because in our comfort zone, we're not moving forward to express and create more livingness in our life. And if you've never had the opportunity to achieve and overcome things, obstacles, as you're moving forward in your life, you've missed something that's very great and should be a part of everybody's life experience, and that is that once you get to the other side, that feeling of victory, if you will, that feeling of overcoming. And in those moments, at that time, that's when we're experiencing what God wants us to experience, what First Cause wants us to experience on an ongoing basis in our life. But unless we're aware of it, unless we realize our purpose, oftentimes we just settle for being in our comfort zone. I'm here to tell you, your comfort zone is fine to a point, but if you pay attention to that urge within you, it seeks to express life at an ever higher and greater degree. And as we do this, the importance of this thing we call prayer, affirmative prayer treatment, is so very important. So what I've decided to do, because as I was teaching this out of the lessons last couple weeks to a class that I'm giving, I thought, well, I want to bring this to the people that I talk to on the show. I'm not going to cover this in one show. We're probably going to take 3, even possibly 4, to cover this entire book. But I want to cover it, a lot of stuff in it. Actually, what's in the lessons has been edited down, so it's not as extensive as what's in the book. If you have the lessons, you can use that. If you have the book, I highly recommend that you read ahead. If you don't have it, it's not very expensive. You can find it on, that online bookstore, Amazon, right? You can find it there. You might check with the Holmes Institute and see if they sell it there, but it's available. And get it and read. You can read ahead, and we'll talk about this as it relates to each and every one of us. We're going to take our first break. I'll see you when we come back.
With Organic Pastures Raw Milk, you're getting a product that has been meticulously managed from grass to glass. From our pastures to our dairy, creamery, and distribution, we work hard to produce a product that is safe and clean for you.
Got lactose intolerance or dairy allergies? Discover delicious raw milk and discover dairy the way it's supposed to be. We provide tours and would love to see you. Come visit the cows, watch the milking, the cheese being made, and learn all about raw milk. We're just 20 miles south and west of Fresno, California. Call to schedule a tour at 559-846-9732.
The Saga of Bridget and Amanda by Carol Love Forbes brings to life the struggles of historical women in early America. Find the Saga of Bridget and Amanda on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and order your copy today.
You enter this door with expired tags. Beyond is another dimension, a dimension of regulations, a dimension of long waits. You have reached the registration zone. What looks like an ordinary shop is actually Mitchell Smog, located in the heart of the Tower District, a few minutes from the DMV. Mitchell Smog offers your vehicle a STAR-certified smog inspection. So remember Mitchell Smog when you need to pass through the registration zone.
Christy Majors is your local real estate connection. With a solid, hard-working team, traditional listings, short sales, probate listings, and foreclosures are treated in a personal and caring way and closed in a timely fashion. Since 2009, Team Majors has closed more than $75 million worth of homes all over California. Reliable and trustworthy, Christy and her team will go the extra mile for every client, whether selling or buying a home. So give Team Majors a call at 559-464-5606 or visit teammajors.com.
After a tough day at the track, cleaning up can be a time-consuming task. That's why we use Extreme Cleaner. the non-toxic, biodegradable, multi-purpose cleaner and degreaser. Extreme Cleaner cuts through even the toughest of grease and grime. Fast. Great for cleaning tools and work surfaces. Extreme Cleaner. Tough on grime, safe on the environment. Visit extremecleaner.com to find a retailer near you.
When you experience flooding in your home, you need to call Clean Master Emergency Flood Service at 559-213-9430. After soaking in water for only 45 minutes, carpet starts to come apart. Clean Master Emergency Flood Service can help, and not just with carpet repair. They also offer carpet cleaning, upholstery cleaning, carpet installation, and more. Call Clean Master Emergency Flood Service, and they'll be there in 60 minutes. Call 559-213-9430.
CentralValleyTalk.com.
Hey, welcome back to New Thought Talk. I am your host, the Reverend Steve Walling. So today we're doing the introductory show on Pray and Prosper. It's the title of the book, written by Dr. Holmes, and he breaks it down, this concept of how to utilize prayer, what prayer is, in a way that we can prosper in our life. And it's a great little book for anybody in New Thought. It's especially a great little book for someone if you happen to be studying your spiritual practices through the eyes of and how science of mind and spirit sees and understands things. So Holmes opens up with a question. He says, what is prayer? And he goes on to say, we pray either to an infinite mind or to an omnipotent power. Prayer is always some form of communion with the universal. He says it reaches its highest possibility when it rises above the limitations of any existing circumstances by appearances. He says, or circumstances, excuse me. He says, this is why Jesus told his followers not to judge by appearances. Jesus did not deny appearance, but he merely said, do not accept it as the only criterion. And this becomes important. Remember when we were talking about race consciousness, the limitations that we have as individuals because we interpret what we call our reality, which is really the materialistic reality, what Judge Troward would call the relative versus the absolute, through our five senses. And our five senses, they're good, they're nice, we appreciate them, but we also know that they lie to us. Not a bad thing. It's just the way it is. It's the way that we have interpreted the world around us. You know, I've often said, you know, when our eyes look down railroad tracks and we see them coming together in the distance, well, obviously we know that they don't come together in the distance, but that's what we see. If we accepted that as our truth, it'd be very confusing as we seek to get to that point where they come together. The same thing when we're standing at the beach and we're looking out over the ocean and the earth looks basically flat and there's nothing out there. It's like it ends. And we all know there was a time when people believed that you would, if you went out far enough, you'd drop over the edge of the earth. Doesn't quite work that way. You know, humanity understood at one time that lightning bolts, that was the gods that were angry at us. Today we use electricity in so many different ways, and we've advanced through technology to utilize electricity at a molecular level and things that we call electronics. And we're even getting better and smaller, you know, when we get down to the quantum level. So, you know, what we see with our eyes, what we feel with our fingers, what we smell with our nose, what we taste with our mouth, what we hear with our ears, is limited in many ways. When we look at things going on in our life, those things that we call conditions or effects, and if we buy into the idea that those conditions and those effects are true reality, that we are limited by whatever those conditions or effects present to our life experience, oftentimes that can be pretty discouraging. We could tend to give up if we just accepted it at that level. Now, oftentimes there are people that they say, okay, I'm gonna pray to God, and or whatever, you know, however they whatever word that they use to understand the divine principle as, and when they do that, as they pray, they're praying that God will take this condition and through the whatever's going on in that condition will bring good into their life. That's awful limiting, because we have to understand, and as we move on in our journey and as we grow, we begin to understand that with God, all things are possible. Well, what does that mean when we say with God, all things are possible? It means that it's not the conditions or the effects out there that are going to lead to the solution and in our life, in the overcoming, transcending, moving beyond whatever those conditions are. So when we look out there, we can say, okay, that's what the material world is bringing forth to us, but it's not necessarily that which we have to deal with when we seek to create a demonstration, a manifestation in our lives so that we can move beyond and transcend that. In other words, we don't ask God to take those conditions and through those conditions create whatever result we want to see. We know and we open ourselves up to an understanding and a belief that with God, all things are possible. If all things are possible with God, then we forget whatever the conditions are. We don't look at the conditions. One of the things that Dr. Holmes used to say, or maybe it was Troward, I don't remember who, but we need to have the ability to see they call it a discordant fact, and look through it to the truth beyond it. In other words, it's a shadow of what is. But the absolute, the truth, is there behind it. And when we see that truth, when we realize that truth as the truth, when we embody that as a reality within our imagination, and not only do we do that on an intellectual level, but we do it on a feeling, emotional level, that we speak our word, and that's what we do when we are doing our prayer work. We speak our word knowing that there's a law that responds, and the greater, the higher the level of our faith and belief, to the greater and the higher of the expression we're going to see in our life as it demonstrates. That's a powerful concept, but it's a concept that most of us grew up not believing in because, again, race consciousness has held us back. But we can free ourselves from that, and we do as we move forward. We study, we treat for ourselves greater understanding, greater growth, a greater realization of God expressing in our life each and every day, and we move beyond that. So he says it reaches its highest possibility when it rises above the limitations of any existing circumstance, moves above and beyond it. He says, this is why Jesus told his followers not to judge by appearances. Jesus did not deny appearances. He merely said, do not accept it as the only criterion. Look beyond that. He says, how could anyone arrive at such a faith unless he knew or she knew that he or she was dealing with a power which can rearrange facts and create new ones? In other words, God is not limited to conditions and effects as God's starting point to create the demonstration, the manifestation of a greater good as we move forward in our life. How does that feel when you begin to think on that, what it means for us as individuals, that we don't have to be tied to? And in fact, we're not, except by our own level of ignorance and belief and by our being tied to what race consciousness tells us. Race consciousness tells us there's limitation in the world. In a world of infinite abundance, there is no limitation. But we see limitation in the world because it's accepted on some level by humanity, becomes part of race consciousness, and it expresses. So moving forward, he says a belief in the indivisible. In the invisible is the very essence of faith. Prayer or spiritual communion demands a complete surrender to the invisible. In other words, we have to move in faith beyond our connectedness, and we're really connected sometimes to this physical, material, what we call reality, and we've got to accept that it's not the end-all, be-all, that it is just a demonstration, if you will, a correspondence to things, and we can move beyond that. We can move beyond that to something higher, better, greater good, greater harmony, greater peace, greater abundance, greater wholeness, greater health in our life. When we realize that within ourselves, when we accept that and we see that as truth. You know, someone said, or I read somewhere, I don't remember which, that when we know the truth of ourself, we are indefeatable. We are captain of our ship, if you will, through our voyage through life. Not a bad thing to think about. He says, wherever our idea or whatever our idea of God may be, the perception of reality is always an inner perception. And bingo, that's what we have to know. Our perception of reality is not what's going on out there. It is within ourselves. And because it's within ourselves, we can move beyond that. When we go into that secret place of the Most High, which is not somewhere out there, it is very much within ourselves. Through our meditative process, through our prayer treatment process, we go there and we can realize a greater good, more abundance. We're not limited to what is out there. He says, we cannot doubt that the Spirit has already made the gift of life since we live. Now, I've talked about this, the idea of life. It's an amazing thing, obviously. If you're watching this, obviously, you are experiencing life as you. But think about this, that at one time on the planet Earth, there was no life. It was, there was steam and there was minerals and there was this, that, and the other. Now, how you move from that to the initial early stages of life on the planet, how you get from one to the other, depends on what you believe. And I'm not going to get into beliefs. I'm just going to say at one time there was no life, and then at some time subsequent to that, there was life. And that life initially was very crude and rudimentary, but at some point it became more sophisticated, and it became single-cell organisms. Little single cells, kind of like amoebas or something like that, moving along, living their life, and when they got too big, when things got just overpowering, it couldn't take in enough of its nutrients to survive, it split. So one little cell became two little cells. That split did not create new life. There wasn't new life to be created all over again. It was that same life within that first cell that separated and became two cells. Very simple. Cells moved on. Evolution moved on. All of a sudden now we've got cells that are beginning to specialize and differentiate, and we get multi-cell organisms. And at the same time, we begin to get cells that are of a sexual orientation. In other words, for simplicity's sake, we had little boy cells, little girl cells, and in order to create more of their kind, they have to come together. As they come together, magic happens, right? And we get other little cells. But in that process, those other little cells are still not new life being created. It's that same original life that's grown beyond the single cell stage, is now in multi-cell stages, and it moves beyond that. And then you get even greater specialization, and you get little critters run around, whatever they are, or little plants. They're all part of that same life. And you go through a lot of time, and you get to a point to where we're here today. But the life that you're experiencing today is that same original life that happened way back when. It hasn't ceased. It's continued to expand, to grow. That's the gift to each and every one of us. At some point, that life within humanity reached a stage of consciousness, recognizing itself, and then even more magic began to happen, if you will, because through consciousness, because we are now living in the nature of the divine, we can access the truth of who we are within ourselves. It's not something we go outside of ourselves for. Very important concept. This is the concept also when we begin to realize that through we can call formalized type of prayer, that we can consciously begin to control, to command, and to accept and experience greater good in our life. And it's available to each and every one of us. That life, that one life, we say there's one life, that life is God, that life is our life now. There's no separateness. Understanding that, it can change the dynamic of life for us and ourselves. It can change the dynamic of life in general as we look out into the world. There's one life. We're all some part of that same life. And that same life is God expressing as life, surrounding us, immersed through us, and expressing as us. And we're all connected. That life didn't, as it began to differentiate into the various cells and stuff, that life didn't change. That life didn't disengage itself from the rest of life. It just individualized. and we're all part of that. How awesome is that? We're going to take our next break. We'll pick that up when we come back. I'll see you in a few.
Ghost Golf is Fresno's most spectacular family entertainment center. It's frightening how much fun you'll have on our 18-hole indoor haunted graveyard course. Skeletons welcome you, but watch out. All sorts of creatures may come to life. Ghost Golf is perfect for scary good parties, so book yours today. You'll get free plays at the Mummy Shooting Gallery, arcades, and air hockey. Check out our party and weekday specials online and like us on Facebook. Come play at family-friendly Ghost Golf. Good times will haunt you.
At McDermott Counseling, you will receive the highest level of care and a welcoming, safe space in which to discuss your most personal issues. Our therapists go above and beyond for you. Call 559-280-5756 or visit McDermottCounseling.com to find a caring therapist who best suits your needs.
Diane Ainsworth's books of poetry and scriptures are available at CondioPress.com and as ebooks at Amazon.com. Diane hopes the words in her books will convey the unconditional love Jesus has for you. Learn more at godsinspirationsblog.wordpress.com and get a copy of Diane's books today.
Hello everyone, my name is Miss G. I offer fun and affordable promotion and advertisement on my talk show. It is called Fresno Vibes. We talk, we play awesome music. I also feature a bunch of different bartenders from different places. I like to have restaurants. I like to have any event, any kind of fun stuff. Contact me at rmgmissg@gmail.com and we will have so much fun and we will promote your business, promote your event right here on my show. So contact me. We'll have fun. Thank you.
In a world where Friday nights have become synonymous with going out to get wasted, consider not doing that and instead save your money and tune in to the Hey Slingshot Show Friday nights at 7 p.m. Or go out anyway and pull out your phone and watch on Facebook or YouTube. You can even watch right now. It won't be live, but there is a significant backlog of shows that you can watch right now. Hey Slingshot, Friday nights at 7 on CentralValleyTalk.com.
Hi, I'm the host of New Thought Talk, Reverend Steve Walling, and I want to take a moment today and give you an opportunity to support our ministry, support our show. You can do that through a PayPal payment. You send the payment through PayPal to the email address of Madera, MADERASAC @gmail.com. If you don't have a PayPal account, you can go down below the link and you can find where you can enter a debit or credit card. I want to thank those that have supported us and those that will continue to support us. You have a great day. Bye. Welcome back to New Thought Talk. I'm your host, Reverend Steve Wong. Moving forward, I'm going to go back and I'm going to read this again because I want to, I want you to get this concept. It's really important. He says, we cannot doubt this, that the Spirit has already made the gift of life since we live, okay? And it's important that we understand that. He says, ours is the privilege of acceptance. Thus, we are to assume an attitude of a grateful beneficiary. And we think about this. We say, okay, we can accept that God has given us the gift of life. And then oftentimes beyond that, we'll look out in the world and we'll say, look at all this limitation. Look at all this lack. Look at all this negativity. Well, if God has gifted us the life experience, each and every one of us, if God is the source of all that is, why would we assume that we got to struggle, that there's limitation? The reason why we assume that is because as our beingness went through the evolutionary process and getting to the point of self-realization, if you will, that awareness of the I am, the individuality, humanity experienced a whole lot of lack and limitation because of the evolutionary process. Judge Tord tells us that during that time, it wasn't the individual that or that the divine principle that God favored. It was the type, the generality. In other words, racial, the whole human race. Individuals were not as important because they, basically, if they were kind of foolish, we take their genes out of the gene pool, so to speak. And I'm only kind of being sort of tongue-in-cheek on that. So we realize there's one life. That life is God. That life is our life now. God has gifted us with the gift of life. As we begin our spiritual journey, is the realization that for each and every one of us, because we are gifted individually with life, we are also gifted individually with talents that are specific and individual to us. That as we learn to express those talents in our life at a greater and higher degree, everything we need, want, and desire is available to us to do that if we understand and open ourselves up to be on the receiving end of those particular things. And that takes a shift in consciousness and an understanding of how we as humanity fit into the greater scheme of things. So he says, this should be done simply and directly. That is, the Spirit is not something that was or that's going to be or become. The truth is that it's that which is. It exists at the very center of our being. One life. That life is God. That life is our life now. There is within each and every one of us, at the core of our being, if you will, the Christ within, God within, however you want to understand that spiritual light within us. There's many different ways we can describe it, but it's there. And it's there, and it urges us to move forward in our life. It urges us to seek more, to express a higher and greater degree of livingness. And as we recognize that, as we recognize our relationship with the whole greater scheme of humanity and the understanding that God will express in our lives, that we can co-create with God a greater, higher degree of livingness for our lives. And it's awesome. Sometimes I talk about it, I get really excited, but it really is. It's awesome. So he says, God is not poor, weak, sick, or unhappy. God is not impoverished, limited, or in bondage. It is this Spirit to which we pray. And what do we do when we pray? We bring ourselves, our consciousness, in communion within ourselves, and understanding and opening up to that which we're praying to. In other words, it's not out there. It's within ourselves. Okay, he says, it is this Spirit to which we pray, the reality to which we approach at the center of our own being. That's what I'm talking about, the center within ourselves. And it's there that we find it. It's there when we go and we sit and we create an inner realization of the truth. We accept that realization of that truth as the reality. We create the mold, if you will, the correspondence, if you will, the mental equivalent of that which we seek to express in our life. And there's a law, and that law responds as we speak our word and as we align ourselves with the divine principle. And this is where some people, they get lost a little bit. They allow race consciousness to still express in their life, got problems. Allow themselves, if you will, to express things that separate them in consciousness from the truth. And I've talked about this over and over again, can't talk about it enough, when this radical rabbi was walking the face of the earth and he was teaching a whole new thought, a whole new understanding of who and what God was. No longer the tribal God of Israel, of the Hebrews, but a God that was omnipotent, that was omnipresent, a God that was available to each and every human being on the face of the earth, a God that was a God of love, a nurturing God, a supplying God, a good God, okay, all these different things. But as Jesus was teaching this, he said, in order to bring ourselves into alignment with that, there are basically two things that we all are required to do. And that is to love our neighbors as ourselves and to love God with all we are. And it actually was in reverse. We love God with all we are. We love our neighbors as ourselves, understanding that as individuals that we are God expressing as us, we have to include in that we, as we love God with all that we are, we're also loving ourselves. And as we love our neighbors as we love ourselves, we're, bringing the whole family under one umbrella, so to speak. We're all together. We're all a unity, a oneness. But, there's that other, myself and the other. And you know that other. We all know that other. That's that person, that group, that individual. Their tribe's different than my tribe. They're different from me. And so as I look out into the world, I see not a unity, not a family of oneness, but I see myself and the other. And at the level that I see myself and the other, to that degree, I've separated myself out from an understanding and an alignment with divine principle. So we got to come back home. In a sense, it's kind of like the prodigal son, which was a great parable, because we're out here in the fields eating, whatever leftovers the hogs, basically don't want to eat, and life kind of sucks a little bit, right? That's a ministerial phrase. Life's tough. And we look back to our Father, if you will, Abba, if you will, and we realize that in our Father's house, in the divine principle, even the lowest is eating a lot better, having a much greater life experience than we are. Sometimes people do that, and instead of understanding what that means to them, they look at that and they begin to get jealous because they don't realize the truth of who they are. And in that jealousy, they separate themselves out even more. They remove themselves in consciousness even further. But those that look to the Father, that look to the divine, look to first cause, look to God, and realize that that is where we need to be, to that individual, as they move forward in their life, they seek greater harmony, they bring themselves in alignment with principle, and there's something that responds. We call that something the law. So moving forward, Holmes says the purpose of prayer or spiritual communion is to seek the conscious union with this indwelling presence. Jesus claimed that the words he spoke were not his, but were the activity of the Spirit within him. And he was the great example, not the great expression. Oftentimes things get lost as the story's told, but we find it if we look into the New Testament that Jesus at some times would send his disciples out and have them do the things that he was doing, the so-called miracle things, healing the sick, raising the dead, creating more abundance in people's life. Now, Jesus didn't say, okay, God, put some power in these disciples and go out and you can show the world what I gave you. He sent them out to do that because he wanted to share with the world the truth of what he was teaching. And that's what the disciples did. And after Jesus passed for a period of time, the apostles went out and others went out and they performed these healing type things. And then at some point in time, the church said, no. They didn't do that. Or, it becomes a side issue. We just focus on what Jesus did. But Jesus wasn't the exception. He was an example for each and every one of us. He says, Holmes goes on to say, Jesus claimed that the words he spoke were not his, the activity of the Spirit within him, and since there is but one mind, this must be true. He says, it is impossible to lose this imprisoned splendor unless we comply with its nature, which must be truth, harmony, and wholeness. We gotta align ourselves with principle. This next paragraph is extremely important because this addresses some of the issues that we face that have been limiting. He says, hate, disunion, fear, and uncertainty may knock at the door of reality, and we're talking about material reality here. He says, but only peace can enter. Only peace can enter. This is the peace to which Jesus referred when he said, not as the world giveth, give I unto you. Not as the world giveth, give I unto you. He's bringing something that is a radical change in how the individuals in his day saw the world. God wasn't some God in a faraway place that was a vengeful, punishing God, but God was all around us, within us, and it was important that we align ourselves with this, and as we do so, we create and we experience a greater good. He says, let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. Peace is at the very center of our beings. We go within. if we are experiencing turmoil in our life on a conscious level, if we go within ourselves, if we quiet the little squirrel cage in the mind, as we let our prejudices go, as we open ourselves up to the truth of who we are, that Christ within, the light within, if you will, it's there that we find peace. It's there that we find harmony. And it's there that this lives within us, which seeks to express in its totality in our day-to-day life experience. So he says, peace at the very center of our being. He says, sometimes we arrive merely at a partial unity with Spirit. At other times we more completely enter into the contemplation of this reality of the truth of who we are. Always, our prayer will be as effective as it is the realization generated in the act of communion within ourselves with the divine, okay? Thus, our words, become clothed upon with the living presence of an invisible power ever projecting itself into form through our meditation. Not through someone else's, through our own. There's a power and a presence in the universe. It is perfect. It's available to each and every one of us as we open ourselves up to it. How awesome is that? Okay? There is a law of mind which follows the pattern of our thought. Pattern of our thought. It's not the thought just at the times that we go within, but it's the pattern of our thought, the trend of our thought, that little ticker tape that goes along in the subjective side of our consciousness that says a lot of things that oftentimes are rather negative or limiting. That's why it's important we understand the effect and the power of race consciousness. That's why we need to understand that, as Holmes talks about this concept of right thinking as we move forward, we have to be aware of what we realize that we're thinking about during the daytime. We have to be aware that when someone does something that is not in accord with our desires, with our wishes, that maybe we need to establish a boundary, but always we need to accept that individual as an expression of God. Maybe what they're doing out of ignorance is bringing harm into the world. We may even call it evil, but they're doing that not because truly there is evil, but because they live in a consciousness of separateness of the truth of who they are, and they seek to essentially make up for it by taking from others, taking to increase their power, taking to increase their wealth, whatever it is. We say, well, they're not nice people, but they are all an expression of God, of the divine principle. We're going to take our last break. I'm going to shorten it up when we come back. We'll move on to this next week, so I'll see you in a few.
Get your copy of Crouching Mama Hidden Veggies today, packed with recipes of delicious food cooked with hidden vegetables, so you can feel confident that you and your family are eating your veggies.
Contact Sprague Electric for all things electrical, solar installations, battery systems, troubleshooting, repairs, and more. Call 559-760-0712. SpragueElectric.com.
Welcome back to New Thought Talk. I'm your host, Reverend Steve Walling. So we're going to cut this last segment short for today, and next week we'll pick up on it. But I want to finish out here on this, where Holmes tells us there is a law of mind which follows the pattern of our thought. This is why it's important that we understand what our pattern of thought is, and that we tend it, if you will. We oversee it. We become aware of it. And we correct it as necessary. He says this law works automatically. It is a mechanical law and a mathematical one. In other words, we can't convince it to do what we want. We can only do what we're supposed to do in a way that we want to see the outcome as the outcome that we want to see demonstrated in our life, which is good, which is love, which is peace, harmony, and abundance. We have to be the generators of that consciousness, if you will, in order to see that reality played out in our life. He said, this is praying in spirit and truth, and according to the law, And there must be a law, even in prayer, if there is to be cosmic order. Cosmic order is kind of it's a big thing. We're not going to go into cosmic order in the way out, but cosmic order as it exists within our own individual life experience. We look out in the world, we see chaos, but we can find cosmic order within ourselves. When we seek that cosmic order within ourselves, our inner light shines higher and greater, more abundantly. And as we do that, not only does our light change, but the light of the world around us, if you will. Even within race consciousness, we raise, and it's amazing. People get lost in the belief of the insignificance of them only being one voice out here in the middle of the darkness and nowhere, and how much power can they bring into the world. Individually, that one person can bring a lot of power in the world. You are that one person. I am that one person. And within us lies the answer to and the truth of the greater love of God for all of God's creation. But we have to go there. We have to recognize it. We have to claim it. We have to put it into practice in our life. And as we do, we lift up humanity as a whole at a higher level than what we even begin to understand. Spiritual communion is deeper than intellectual perception. The prayer of the intellect may be perfect in form, but this form must be warmed and colored by feeling and conviction. In other words, when we're treating, we're not just speaking words. We got to bring life to the words that we speak. As we bring life to the words that we speak, we bring a greater inner reality in our imagination. It's not us that brings power into the words that we speak, for sure. The power comes from God, from first cause. But as we go within and we create within ourselves with inner passion, inner emotion, inner feeling of love, of acceptance of that which we're treating for, it's like we bring a greater receptivity to ourselves. As we treat, if we know the truth as we treat, as it already exists, and we accept that, in that knowingness and that acceptance, you cannot accept good in your life and be dull to it. You can't. You're accepting good into your life. You've got to feel that good. You've got to experience that good as it already exists. And in truth, it does already exist. It exists within the potential reality of the divine gift that was given to each and every one of us before we took our first breath. It's always been there. It's always waited on us. And it always responds to us at the level of our faith and our belief, our conviction. I'm going to leave it there for today. I want to thank you for being with us. I don't know how many weeks it's going to take to get through this. I realize it may take longer than what I first thought. So if you don't have the book, go ahead and pick it up. If you have the book, you may want to read ahead. Right now, I'm just on page 12 or page 10, and we'll see what we cover. Thank you for being with us today. Take what we've talked about today, consider it, contemplate on it, and begin to put it into your life if it's not already part of your daily spiritual practices. And I'll see you when we come back next week. May the light of God surround you, the love of God enfold you, the power of God protect you, and the presence of God watch over you, because wherever you are, believe it or not, the truth is God is there, always. God is there, and all is well when you know it. See you next week. Bye.